Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The desert sand still clung to Marcus Rodriguez's boots as he stepped off the military transport plane at Dover Air Force Base. 18 months. That's how long he'd been away from home, serving his country in the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan. 18 months of firefights, brotherhood, and the constant ache of missing his family. The Navy SEAL insignia on his uniform caught the afternoon sun as he shouldered his duffel bag, his mind already racing toward the reunion he dreamed about every single night in that godforsaken desert. Marcus had always been a man of precision. In the SEALs, your life depended on it. Every mission was calculated, every movement deliberate, every decision critical. But nothing in his military training had prepared him for what awaited him at home. As he walked through the terminal, fellow service members nodded in respect. They recognized the look in his eyes, the 1,000-yard stare of a warrior who'd seen too much, but also the eager anticipation of a father and husband coming home. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, his wife of 12 years. "Can't wait to see you, baby." Tommy's been counting down the days. The message should have filled him with warmth, but something felt off. The timestamp showed it was sent 3 hours ago, and Sarah was usually more responsive when he was traveling. Marcus shook off the feeling. He was just being paranoid, a side effect of spending too much time in hostile territory where every shadow could hide an enemy. The drive from the base to their suburban home in Virginia Beach took 47 minutes. Marcus knew this because he'd timed it countless times before previous deployments. He'd memorized every landmark, every turn, every detail of the route that would take him back to his family. The familiar sights should have been comforting. The strip malls, the school where Tommy attended 3rd grade, the coffee shop where he and Sarah used to have their Sunday morning dates before deployment schedules consumed their lives. But as Marcus pulled into his driveway at 1847 Maple Street, something was wrong. The house looked exactly the same. White colonial with blue shutters, Sarah's rose garden in full bloom, Tommy's bicycle lying on its side in the front yard. Yet there was an emptiness to it that he couldn't quite identify. The windows were dark despite the early evening hour, and Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. Marcus used his key to enter through the front door, the familiar scent of home washing over him. "Sarah? Tommy?" His voice echoed through the empty hallway. No response. He dropped his duffel bag and walked through the house methodically, checking each room with the same tactical awareness he'd used clearing a building in Kandahar. Everything was in its place, but nobody was home. His phone rang, and Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Marcus, thank God you're calling." Her voice was strained, panicked. "There's been an accident. Tommy's in the hospital. I'm at Virginia Beach General Emergency Room. Please hurry." The world tilted on its axis. Marcus felt his training kick in, the same calm focus that had kept him alive through 3 tours of duty. "What happened? How bad is it?" I don't know. Sarah was crying now. He fell from his bike, hit his head. "They're running tests. Just please get here as fast as you can." Marcus was already moving toward his truck before she finished the sentence. The 15-minute drive to the hospital became a blur of traffic lights and racing thoughts. His son, his 8-year-old boy who collected baseball cards and dreamed of becoming a Marine like his dad, was hurt. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd survived countless dangerous missions overseas only to come home to his worst nightmare. Virginia Beach General Hospital's emergency room was a maze of sterile corridors and harsh fluorescent lights. Marcus found Sarah in the waiting area, her face red and puffy from crying. She looked exhausted, her clothes wrinkled as if she'd been there for hours. When she saw him, she collapsed into his arms, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. This was his wife, the woman he'd married fresh out of SEAL training, the mother of his child. "Where is he?" Marcus asked, holding her tight but already scanning the area with his tactical mindset. "They took him for a CT scan 20 minutes ago," Sarah said, her voice muffled against his chest. The doctor said they needed to check for brain swelling. Marcus, I'm so scared. A tall man in scrubs approached them, his badge identifying him as Dr. James Mitchell, Emergency Medicine. He was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe mid-30s, with perfectly styled dark hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of making life-and-death decisions. But there was something about the way the doctor looked at Sarah, a moment too long, a familiarity that seemed inappropriate for someone who should be a stranger. Mr. Rodriguez, I presume? Dr. Mitchell extended his hand. I'm Dr. Mitchell. I've been treating your son. Marcus shook the man's hand, noting the firm grip, but also the slight hesitation in the doctor's eyes. In the military, you learn to read people quickly. Your life often depended on distinguishing friend from foe in seconds. Something about Dr. Mitchell set off Marcus's internal alarm system. How is Tommy? Marcus asked directly. He's stable, but we're monitoring him closely, Dr. Mitchell replied, consulting his clipboard. He suffered a significant head trauma from the bicycle accident. We've given him medication for the swelling, and the CT scan should give us a clearer picture of any internal damage. Marcus noticed that Dr. Mitchell avoided eye contact when he mentioned the medication timing. Another red flag. When exactly did the accident happen? There was a pause, barely perceptible, but Marcus caught it. Sarah and Dr. Mitchell exchanged a glance that lasted a fraction of a second too long. Around 2:30 this afternoon, Sarah answered quickly. I called 911 immediately. But something didn't add up. Marcus's mind raced through the timeline. He'd landed at Dover at 1,400 hours, driven straight home, found the house empty, and received Sarah's call around 1,900 hours. If Tommy's accident had happened at 14:30, why was Sarah just calling him about it at 1900? And why did Dr. Mitchell seem so familiar with his wife? Can I see him? Marcus asked. Of course, Dr. Mitchell said. But he's sedated right now. The next few hours are critical. As they walked toward Tommy's room, Marcus's trained eye cataloged every detail. The way Dr. Mitchell's hand briefly touched Sarah's lower back as they passed through a doorway. The way Sarah seemed to know exactly where they were going, as if she'd made this walk before. The way other staff members nodded at Dr. Mitchell with a respect that bordered on deference. Tommy looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors. His dark hair was matted with dried blood, and a large bandage covered the left side of his head. Marcus felt something break inside his chest as he reached for his son's hand. This little boy was his whole world. The reason he fought overseas, the reason he came home. Daddy. Tommy's voice was barely a whisper, his eyes fluttering open. I'm here, buddy, Marcus said, squeezing his son's hand gently. Daddy's here now. But as Marcus looked at his injured son, then at his wife and the doctor standing too close together in the doorway, he realized that the war he'd been fighting overseas was nothing compared to the battle he was about to face at home. The machines monitoring Tommy's vitals beeped steadily in the background, but Marcus could hear something else, the sound of his carefully constructed world beginning to crack. The hours that followed blended together like a nightmare Marcus couldn't wake up from. Tommy drifted in and out of consciousness, his small hand gripping his father's with surprising strength whenever he was awake. Marcus had pulled a chair close to the bed and hadn't moved since, his eyes never leaving his son's face. Every beep of the heart monitor, every adjustment the nurses made to the four-drip, every subtle change in Tommy's breathing. Marcus cataloged it all with the same attention to detail that had kept his unit alive in combat zones. But it was during these long, quiet hours that Marcus began to notice things that didn't make sense. Small inconsistencies that his military training had taught him never to ignore. Sarah had barely left Tommy's side either, but she seemed restless, constantly checking her phone and glancing toward the door. When Dr. Mitchell made his rounds every 2 hours, there was an ease between him and Sarah that spoke of familiarity. They moved around each other in the small hospital room like they'd done it before, like they knew each other's rhythms. At 0300 hours, Marcus decided to test his growing suspicions. Sarah, you must be exhausted, he said quietly, not taking his eyes off Tommy. Why don't you go home and get some rest? I'll stay with him. Sarah's response came too quickly. No, I can't leave him. I won't leave him again. Again. The word hung in the air between them. Marcus filed it away but didn't react. Instead, he stood up and stretched, playing the role of the concerned but trusting husband. I'm going to get some coffee from the vending machine. You want anything? Just a water, Sarah said. But her attention was already back on her phone. Marcus walked out of the room but didn't go to the vending machines. Instead, he positioned himself around the corner where he could observe Tommy's room without being seen. Within minutes, Dr. Mitchell appeared, entering the room without knocking. Through the glass window, Marcus watched as the doctor placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, a gesture that was far too intimate for a professional relationship. They spoke in hushed tones, their body language revealing an intimacy that made Marcus's blood run cold. Sarah looked up at Dr. Mitchell with an expression Marcus recognized. It was the same way she used to look at him during their early years of marriage. The same expression of trust, of affection, of something deeper than friendship. Marcus retreated to the actual vending machines, his mind racing. He'd spent years learning to read situations, to gather intelligence, to piece together incomplete information into actionable intel. Every instinct he developed as a SEAL was screaming that something was wrong. But this wasn't Afghanistan, and the enemy wasn't hiding in caves. This was his family, his life, and the betrayal was happening right under his nose. When he returned to Tommy's room 20 minutes later, Dr. Mitchell was gone, but Sarah's demeanor had changed. She seemed calmer, more composed, as if whatever conversation she'd had with the doctor had reassured her about something. Everything okay? Marcus asked, handing her the water bottle. Dr. Mitchell says Tommy's responding well to the treatment, Sarah said without looking at him. His latest blood work shows improvement. But Marcus had read Tommy's chart when the nurse updated it earlier. There had been no new blood work ordered in the past 4 hours. Sarah was lying to him, and she was using their son's medical condition to do it. The next morning brought a shift change, and with it, a nurse Marcus hadn't seen before. Patricia Williams was a veteran of the emergency department, her badge showing 15 years of service. Unlike the younger nurses who seemed to regard Dr. Mitchell with nervous respect, Nurse Williams carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd seen it all. As she checked Tommy's '4 and updated his chart, Marcus engaged her in conversation. Dr. Mitchell seems very dedicated, he said carefully. Has he been taking care of children long? Nurse Williams paused in her work, giving Marcus a look that seemed to weigh whether she should speak. Dr. Mitchell is thorough in his patient care, she said diplomatically. Then, after a moment, she added quietly, sometimes he takes a very personal interest in certain cases. The way she emphasized personal told Marcus everything he needed to know. This woman had seen something, knew something, and was trying to warn him without breaking professional protocol. When did you start treating my son yesterday? Marcus asked. Nurse Williams consulted her notes. Well, that's interesting. According to the ambulance report, your son arrived at 1,445 hours. But Dr. Mitchell didn't begin treatment until almost 1,630 hours. Marcus felt his jaw clench. An hour and 45 minutes. In medical emergencies, especially with head trauma, every minute mattered. Why the delay? That's unusual, Nurse Williams admitted. Dr. Mitchell was on duty, but according to the records, he was unavailable until 16:30. The initial assessment was handled by Dr. Chun, but then Dr. Mitchell took over the case personally. After Nurse Williams left, Marcus sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, pieces of a horrifying puzzle beginning to come together. Tommy's accident had happened around 1,430 hours. The ambulance had arrived at the hospital at 14:45. But Dr. Mitchell, the man who was clearly involved with Marcus's wife, had been unavailable for nearly 2 hours during the most critical window of his son's treatment. Marcus pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his messages with Sarah from the past month. He'd been so focused on his deployment, on missing home, that he hadn't paid attention to the subtle changes in her communication patterns. But now, looking back, he could see it. The responses that came hours late. The excuses about being busy with errands or Tommy's activities. The gradual decrease in the intimate details she used to share about their daily lives. But it was a message from 3 weeks ago that made his blood freeze. Had to take Tommy to the doctor today for his soccer physical. Dr. Mitchell says he's in perfect health. Dr. Mitchell, the same doctor who was now treating Tommy's head injury, was the same doctor who had given him a routine physical weeks before the accident. Sarah had been taking their son to see her lover for routine medical care. She'd been building a relationship between Tommy and Dr. Mitchell, normalizing their interaction. And when Tommy had his accident, she'd made sure he ended up in Dr. Mitchell's care. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot 4 stories below. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. In the military, he'd faced enemy combatants who wanted to kill him. But this was different. This was betrayal from the people he trusted most, and it involved his innocent son. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Check the security cameras from yesterday. Level B parking garage, 1,400 to 1,500 hours. A friend who knows the truth. Marcus stared at the message, his heart pounding. Someone else knew what was happening. Someone had been watching, and they wanted him to know the truth. He looked back at Tommy's bed, where his son was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his world was about to be turned upside down. Then he looked at Sarah, who was dozing in her chair, her phone clutched in her hand even while she slept. The war Marcus thought he'd left overseas had followed him home. But this time, the enemy wasn't a foreign insurgent hiding in the mountains of Afghanistan. The enemy was sleeping 3 feet away from him, wearing his wedding ring and sharing his name. And if his suspicions were correct, that enemy had put their son's life at risk to protect a secret that was about to destroy everything Marcus had ever believed about his family. Marcus waited until Sarah left for the hospital cafeteria before making his move. She'd been increasingly restless as the morning progressed, constantly checking her phone and making excuses to step out of Tommy's room. When she finally announced she was going to get breakfast, Marcus knew this was his opportunity. He kissed Tommy's forehead gently. His son was awake now, much more alert than he'd been the night before, which should have been reassuring. But Marcus had noticed something that made his stomach churn. When Dr. Mitchell had made his morning rounds, Tommy had smiled and said, "Hi, Dr. Jim." Not Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Jim. The familiarity in his son's voice suggested this wasn't the first time they'd interacted, and certainly not just from yesterday's emergency treatment. "Daddy, where are you going?" Tommy asked weakly. "Just to make a phone call, buddy." "I'll be right back," Marcus promised, though he knew that after what he was about to discover, nothing would ever be the same. Marcus made his way to the hospital's security office, located in the basement level near the administrative offices. His military credentials and the story about wanting to understand exactly what happened to his son got him a sympathetic ear from the security supervisor, a former Marine named Rodriguez. No relation, but the shared name created an instant bond. "I just want to see the footage from yesterday afternoon," Marcus explained. "My son's accident happened around 1,430 hours, but some of the timeline doesn't make sense. Maybe the cameras caught something that could help us understand how he fell." Rodriguez led him to a small room filled with monitors displaying various camera feeds throughout the hospital. "We've got cameras covering all the public areas, including the parking structures. What time frame are you looking at?" "Between 1,400 and 1,500 hours. Level B parking garage." Marcus's voice was steady, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. Rodriguez pulled up the footage and began scrolling through the timestamp. "Level B, that's where most of the doctors park. Here we go, 1,400 hours." The grainy black and white footage showed the typical afternoon activity, people walking to and from their cars, occasional hospital staff and scrubs moving with purpose. For the first few minutes, nothing seemed unusual. Then, at 1,407 hours, Marcus saw a figure that made his blood freeze. Sarah's silver Honda Civic pulled into a parking space near the elevator bank. But she wasn't alone. As the driver's side door opened, Dr. James Mitchell emerged. Sarah got out of the passenger side, and they stood talking beside the car for several minutes. Their body language was intimate, standing close, Mitchell's hand on Sarah's arm, their faces inches apart as they spoke in what appeared to be hushed, urgent tones. "Can you enhance this section?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rodriguez zoomed in on the timestamp, 1,412 hours. Marcus watched as Dr. Mitchell pulled Sarah into an embrace that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. This wasn't a friendly hug between acquaintances. This was the embrace of lovers, passionate and familiar. Sarah's hands tangled in Mitchell's hair as he pressed her against the side of the car. But it was what happened next that shattered Marcus completely. At 1,418 hours, Sarah's phone rang. Marcus watched his wife answer the call, and even without audio, he could see the exact moment her demeanor changed. She went rigid, pushed Mitchell away, and began gesturing frantically. Mitchell grabbed her shoulders, apparently trying to calm her down. "That's the call about Tommy's accident," Marcus realized aloud. "She got the call while she was with him." Rodriguez fast-forwarded the footage. At 1,423 hours, Sarah and Mitchell were in heated discussion. Mitchell was clearly agitated, running his hands through his hair, pacing beside the car. Sarah was crying, pointing toward the hospital entrance. Then, at 1,427 hours, something that made Marcus's vision blur with rage, Mitchell grabbed Sarah's face in both hands and kissed her deeply, as if trying to reassure her. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. At 1,431 hours, Mitchell walked Sarah to the hospital entrance, but instead of going directly inside, he took a detour. The timestamp showed him stopping at the information desk, talking to someone off camera, then making a phone call that lasted exactly 3 minutes. "Rodriguez, can you pull up the emergency department footage for the same time period?" The security supervisor switched camera angles to show the ER entrance. At 1,445 hours, the ambulance arrived with Tommy. Marcus watched through tears as his son was wheeled into the emergency department on a stretcher, his small body looking broken and vulnerable. But Dr. Mitchell was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Dr. Mitchell during this time?" Marcus asked. Rodriguez checked the footage from different angles. At 1,447 hours, Mitchell appeared in the ER, but instead of immediately treating Tommy, he spent several minutes in what appeared to be an intense conversation with another doctor, presumably Dr. Chun, who had handled the initial assessment according to Nurse Williams. The security footage revealed the horrifying truth. Dr. Mitchell had deliberately delayed treating Tommy's head injury. While Marcus's son lay injured and vulnerable, fighting for his life, Dr. Mitchell had been more concerned with managing the situation to protect his affair with Sarah. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez muttered, understanding what they were watching. "That doctor delayed treating your kid?" Marcus couldn't speak. The rage building inside him was unlike anything he'd felt in combat. In Afghanistan, the enemy had been clear, insurgents trying to kill him and his brothers in arms. But this was different. This was his wife and a trusted medical professional putting his child's life at risk to protect their secret. "I need copies of this footage," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "I'll have to check with my supervisor. My son nearly died because that doctor was more worried about covering up his affair than providing immediate medical care," Marcus interrupted. "This is evidence of medical malpractice at best, criminal negligence at worst." Rodriguez looked at the screen, then at Marcus, and made a decision. "Give me a flash drive." This conversation never happened. While Rodriguez copied the files, Marcus's phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number. "Meet me in the hospital chapel in 10 minutes. Come alone. There's more you need to know." Marcus pocketed the flash drive containing the security footage and made his way to the chapel, a small, quiet room on the second floor designed to provide comfort to families dealing with medical crises. He found an elderly woman sitting in the back pew, her hospital volunteer badge identifying her as Eleanor Brooks. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said quietly without turning around. "I've been waiting for you to come home. You sent the messages?" Eleanor nodded. "I live across the street from you. I've been watching your house while you were deployed, keeping an eye on things for a neighbor. I saw things I wished I hadn't seen. Marcus sat down beside her, his hands clenched into fists. What did you see? Your wife's been bringing that doctor to your house for months, Eleanor said softly. Usually when Tommy was at school. But yesterday was different. Yesterday, Tommy came home early from school, some kind of early dismissal day. He surprised them. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Tommy had caught his mother with Dr. Mitchell. The accident hadn't been random. It had happened because his 8-year-old son had discovered his mother's affair and ran out of the house in confusion and pain. Tommy was riding his bike away from the house when he crashed. Eleanor continued. He was crying, riding fast, not paying attention. He hit that pothole at the corner of Elm Street and went over the handlebars. I called 911 immediately, but your wife, she took several minutes to come outside. She was still fixing her clothes, still trying to look normal. Marcus closed his eyes, the full horror of the situation washing over him. His son had been injured because he discovered his mother's betrayal. And then, to make matters worse, the man responsible for that betrayal had deliberately delayed Tommy's medical treatment to protect their secret. There's security footage at your house, too, Eleanor whispered. Your doorbell camera system. It's all there, Mr. Rodriguez. Everything you need to know. As Marcus sat in the hospital chapel, surrounded by the quiet prayers of other families in crisis, he realized that the man who had returned from Afghanistan was gone forever. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood that the real war wasn't overseas. It was right here at home, and it was being fought against the people he'd trusted most. Tommy was alive, thank God. But the family Marcus had fought to protect, the home he'd dreamed about during those long nights in the desert, the marriage he believed was solid, all of it was built on lies. And now he had the evidence to prove it. Marcus returned to Tommy's room with the weight of devastating truth pressing down on his shoulders like a 100-pound rucksack. Sarah was back from the cafeteria, sitting beside their son's bed, feeding him small spoonfuls of vanilla pudding. The scene would have been heartwarming under normal circumstances, a loving mother caring for her injured child. But now, knowing what he knew, Marcus saw it differently. Every gentle touch, every soothing word felt like another layer of deception. How's he doing? Marcus asked, forcing normalcy into his voice while studying Sarah's face for tells he'd been too blind to see before. Much better, Sarah said, smiling at Tommy. Dr. Mitchell says he can probably go home tomorrow if his next CT scan looks good. Dr. Mitchell. Even hearing the name made Marcus's jaw clench, but he maintained his facade. That's great news. Has he been by recently? About 20 minutes ago, Sarah replied, but she didn't meet Marcus's eyes. He wanted to check Tommy's reflexes again. Marcus nodded, filing away another piece of information. 20 minutes ago, he'd been in the security office watching footage of his wife kissing another man. Dr. Mitchell's timing wasn't coincidental. He'd waited until Marcus was gone to visit Tommy's room. The coordination between them was becoming clearer. Daddy, Tommy said weakly, can we go home soon? I don't like it here. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, taking his son's small hand. Soon, buddy. We just want to make sure you're completely better first. Dr. Jim is nice, Tommy continued innocently. He comes to our house sometimes. He brought me a baseball card last week. Sarah's face went pale, and she quickly intervened. Tommy, you're confused because of your head injury. Dr. Mitchell has only been taking care of you here at the hospital. But Tommy shook his head with the stubborn clarity that only children possess. No, Mommy. He came when Daddy was gone. You said it was our secret, remember? You made me promise not to tell Daddy about Dr. Jim visiting. The words hit Marcus like shrapnel. His 8-year-old son had been sworn to secrecy about his mother's affair. Sarah had corrupted their child, made him complicit in her betrayal. The rage building in Marcus's chest was unlike anything he'd experienced in 3 tours of combat. Sarah was frantically trying to do damage control. Tommy, honey, you're remembering things wrong because you hit your head. Dr. Mitchell is just your doctor here. But Mommy, Tommy needs to rest, Sarah said firmly, standing up abruptly. Marcus, can we talk outside? They stepped into the hallway, and Marcus watched his wife transform before his eyes. Gone was the gentle mother feeding pudding to their son. In her place was someone calculating, someone prepared to lie to protect herself. He's confused because of the concussion, Sarah said quickly. Head injuries can cause false memories, mixing up dreams with reality. Dr. Mitchell explained it to me. Did he? Marcus asked quietly. And when exactly did Dr. Mitchell explain head injury symptoms to you? Before or after Tommy's accident? Sarah's eyes widened slightly, a micro-expression that confirmed Marcus's suspicions. She'd made a mistake, revealed knowledge she shouldn't have possessed. I mean, he explained it after the accident, of course, Sarah backtracked. When I was asking about Tommy's recovery, Marcus stepped closer to his wife, using the intimidation techniques he'd learned in military interrogation training. Not to hurt her, but to unsettle her, to make her reveal more than she intended. Sarah, I need you to be completely honest with me, he said, his voice deadly calm. Is there anything about yesterday that you haven't told me? Anything about how Tommy's accident happened? For a moment, he saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, fear, maybe even relief at the possibility of confession. But then her defenses slammed back into place. Marcus, you're scaring me, she said, taking a step back. I know you're upset about Tommy, we both are. But you're acting paranoid. Maybe you should talk to someone about readjustment issues from your deployment. She was deflecting, trying to make him question his own judgment by suggesting his military service had damaged his mental state. It was a manipulation tactic, and a cruel one. You're right, Marcus said, backing down deliberately. I'm probably just exhausted. Why don't you go home and get some rest? I'll stay with Tommy tonight. I don't want to leave him, Sarah protested. You've been here almost 24 hours straight. You need sleep. I'll call if anything changes. After some resistance, Sarah finally agreed to go home. Marcus watched her walk down the hospital corridor, noting how she immediately pulled out her phone the moment she thought she was out of his sight. She was calling someone, undoubtedly Dr. Mitchell, to warn him about Tommy's innocent revelations. Once Sarah was gone, Marcus returned to Tommy's room and sat beside his son's bed. Hey, buddy, can we talk man-to-man for a minute? Tommy nodded eagerly. Despite his injury, he was alert and responsive, and Marcus could see the intelligence in his eyes that reminded him so much of himself at that age. You mentioned Dr. Jim comes to our house sometimes. Can you tell me more about that? Tommy looked around nervously, as if checking to make sure his mother wasn't listening. Mommy said it was supposed to be a secret. She said it would hurt your feelings if you knew. It's okay, Tommy. You're not in trouble. Daddy just needs to understand what's been happening while I was away. Dr. Jim is nice, Tommy said carefully. He brings me presents sometimes. Mommy says he's a special friend who helps take care of us when you're far away fighting bad guys. Marcus felt his heart breaking for his innocent son, who had been manipulated into believing that his mother's affair was somehow a normal part of taking care of their family. Tommy, what happened yesterday before your accident? Do you remember? Tommy's face scrunched up in concentration. I came home early from school because Mrs. Peterson was sick. I used my key like Mommy taught me. But when I went upstairs to find Mommy, she was in your bedroom with Dr. Jim. They were wrestling, I think, and they didn't have all their clothes on. The clinical way Tommy described what he'd seen made it even more heartbreaking. His 8-year-old mind had tried to make sense of something he shouldn't have witnessed. What happened next, son? Mommy got really upset when she saw me. She yelled at me to go to my room, but I got scared and ran outside instead. I got on my bike because I wanted to go find you, but I couldn't remember where you were. I was crying and riding really fast, and then I hit that big hole in the road and fell off. Marcus pulled his son into a gentle hug, being careful not to disturb his injuries. Tommy's accident hadn't been random. It had been the direct result of a traumatized child trying to process his mother's betrayal. Daddy, are you going to get divorced like Jimmy's parents? Tommy asked quietly. The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. His son was already anticipating the destruction of their family, already preparing for the upheaval that would follow when the truth came out. I don't know, buddy, Marcus answered honestly. But I promise you that whatever happens, Daddy loves you more than anything in the world, and I'm going to make sure you're safe." As Tommy drifted off to sleep, Marcus sat in the darkened hospital room, his mind racing through everything he'd discovered. The security footage showing Sarah and Dr. Mitchell together during Tommy's emergency. Eleanor Brooks' testimony about the affair. Tommy's innocent revelations about the secret visits. The deliberately delayed medical treatment. Each piece of evidence was damning on its own, but together they painted a picture of betrayal so complete, so calculated, that it took Marcus's breath away. This wasn't just an affair. This was a systematic deception that had put their child's life at risk. Marcus pulled out his phone and began typing a message to his former commanding officer, Captain David Hayes. If he was going to war with his wife and her lover, he needed backup. He needed someone who understood tactics, strategy, and how to win when the odds were stacked against you. Because Marcus Rodriguez, decorated Navy SEAL, was about to engage in the most important mission of his life. Not for God and country this time, but for his son and for justice. And unlike his enemies in Afghanistan, Sarah and Dr. Mitchell had no idea what was coming for them. Captain David Hayes arrived at Virginia Beach General at 0600 hours the next morning, exactly when Marcus had requested. The former commanding officer looked every inch the career military man, steel gray hair, ramrod posture, and eyes that missed nothing. He'd served 3 tours with Marcus in Afghanistan and had saved his life more than once. If Marcus was calling in this favor, Hayes knew the situation was serious. They met in the hospital parking garage, the same location where Marcus had watched his wife betray him on security footage. The irony wasn't lost on either man. "Talk to me, Rodriguez," Hayes said without preamble. "Your message said you needed tactical support for a domestic situation." Marcus handed him the flash drive containing the security footage and gave him a condensed version of what he'd discovered. Hayes listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "So we've got adultery, child endangerment, and medical malpractice," Hayes summarized. "What's your mission objective?" "I want custody of my son, and I want both of them to face consequences for what they did," Marcus replied. "But I need more evidence. What I have is good, but a smart lawyer could create reasonable doubt." Hayes studied the hospital building. "You're right. We need overwhelming evidence. What about the doorbell camera system your neighbor mentioned?" "That's my next target, but I need to be careful. Sarah's suspicious already, and if I tip my hand too early, they'll cover their tracks." "What's your wife's schedule today?" Marcus checked his phone. "She texted me this morning. She's bringing Tommy some books from home around 1,000 hours. Then she has errands to run. Based on her patterns, I'm betting those errands involve meeting with Dr. Mitchell." Hayes nodded. "We'll set up surveillance. I'll handle the tech side. I've got contacts who can help us access your home security system remotely. You focus on gathering intelligence here at the hospital." As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Mitchell appeared in the parking garage, walking toward his BMW with the confident stride of a man who believed he was untouchable. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists, but Hayes placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Not yet," Hayes warned. "Emotional reactions compromise missions. We stick to the plan." They watched as Dr. Mitchell got into his car and drove away, apparently heading home after his night shift. The timing was perfect. It meant he wouldn't be around when Sarah visited Tommy. Back in the hospital, Marcus found Sarah already in Tommy's room, unpacking a bag of books and toys. She'd dressed carefully, makeup perfectly applied, hair styled, wearing a dress that seemed inappropriate for a hospital visit. She was clearly planning to see someone else after leaving the hospital. "How did you sleep?" she asked Marcus, but her attention was focused on arranging Tommy's belongings. "Fine," Marcus lied. He'd spent the night thinking about how to expose the truth without traumatizing Tommy further. "Any word on when the final CT scan will be?" Dr. Mitchell said probably this afternoon, Sarah replied. "If it looks good, Tommy can go home tonight." Marcus noted that she'd spoken to Dr. Mitchell about the CT scan, even though he wasn't supposed to be on duty today. More evidence of their ongoing communication. "That's great," Marcus said. I should probably go home and get the house ready for him. Make sure his room is set up properly. Sarah's reaction was immediate and telling. No, she said quickly, then caught herself. I mean, I already did that yesterday morning. Everything's ready. But Marcus knew she was lying. According to Eleanor Brooks, Sarah had been with Dr. Mitchell yesterday morning when Tommy came home early from school. She hadn't been preparing the house. She'd been too busy with her affair to think about her son's needs. I'd still like to check, Marcus insisted. Maybe pick up some of his favorite snacks. Make sure we have everything he needs for recovery. Sarah was clearly struggling with how to discourage him without seeming suspicious. I could do that later, she offered. You should stay here with Tommy. Actually, Marcus said, playing his next card, I'd like Tommy to come with me. A quick trip home might help his spirits, and Dr. Mitchell said some light activity would be good for him. Dr. Mitchell didn't say that. Sarah contradicted automatically, then realized her mistake. How would she know what Dr. Mitchell had or hadn't said unless she'd spoken to him privately? Tommy, oblivious to the undercurrents, perked up at the suggestion. Can we go home, Daddy? I want to see my room. We'll see what the doctor says, Marcus replied, but he was already planning. If he could get Tommy home, he could access the security footage while keeping his son safe and away from Sarah's lies. Sarah's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with poorly concealed anxiety. I really should run those errands, she said. Will you be okay here with Tommy for a few hours? Of course, Marcus said. Take all the time you need. After Sarah left, Marcus waited exactly 15 minutes before implementing his plan. He spoke quietly with Nurse Williams, explaining that he wanted to take Tommy home briefly to check the house and gather some belongings. Given Tommy's improved condition and the fact that his father was a responsible adult, she agreed to the temporary discharge with instructions to return if any symptoms worsened. The drive home gave Marcus time to prepare Tommy for what they might discover. Buddy, when we get home, Daddy might need to check some things on the computer. Can you help me by staying in your room and reading one of your new books? Are you looking for the bad guys? Tommy asked with the innocence that broke Marcus's heart. Something like that, Marcus replied honestly. Their house at 1847 Maple Street looked exactly the same from the outside, but Marcus now saw it through the lens of betrayal. This wasn't just his home anymore. It was a crime scene where his family had been systematically destroyed. Once inside, Marcus settled Tommy in his room with strict instructions not to come out until called. Then he accessed his home security system, a comprehensive setup he'd installed before his last deployment to keep his family safe while he was overseas. The irony was bitter. The system meant to protect them had instead recorded their destruction. The footage from the past month was devastating. Marcus fast-forwarded through weeks of evidence, watching his wife bring Dr. Mitchell into their home repeatedly. They used the living room, the kitchen, and most painfully, the master bedroom Marcus had shared with Sarah for 12 years. But it was the footage from yesterday that provided the smoking gun. At 1,347 hours, the doorbell camera recorded Tommy arriving home early from school. The boy used his key and entered the house, his backpack slung over his shoulder, completely unaware of what awaited him upstairs. At 1,352 hours, the interior cameras captured Tommy opening the master bedroom door. Even without audio, Marcus could see his son's shock and confusion as he discovered his mother in bed with Dr. Mitchell. The boy stood frozen for several seconds before Sarah noticed him. What followed was captured in brutal detail. Sarah's panic, Dr. Mitchell's anger at being discovered, Tommy's terrified retreat from the room. The cameras tracked Tommy as he ran through the house and out the front door, tears streaming down his face. But the most damning evidence was what happened next. Instead of immediately following Tommy outside, Sarah and Dr. Mitchell spent crucial minutes arguing in the bedroom. The timestamp showed they wasted nearly 10 minutes getting dressed and planning their response before Sarah finally went outside to find her injured son. 10 minutes. Tommy had been lying unconscious on the street for 10 minutes, while his mother prioritized protecting her affair over her child's life. Marcus copied all the relevant footage to multiple drives, his hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just adultery anymore. This was child endangerment, possibly criminal negligence. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. His phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Marcus, you need to get back to the hospital immediately." Her voice was panicked. "Dr. Mitchell says Tommy's condition has changed. They need to run more tests." Marcus looked at Tommy, who was quietly reading in his room, completely fine except for his healing head injury. "What kind of change?" "I don't know. Something about his brain activity. Just get here now." Marcus hung up, his mind racing. This was either a genuine emergency or a trap designed to get him away from the house and the evidence he'd just discovered. But he couldn't risk Tommy's health, even if it meant walking into an ambush. As he prepared to leave, Marcus realized that Dr. Mitchell's deadly game of protection was escalating. The doctor was no longer content to simply cover up the affair. He was actively manipulating the medical situation to maintain control. And Marcus was about to walk directly into the enemy's stronghold, with his son as the ultimate prize in a war that was just beginning. Marcus arrived at the hospital with Tommy in tow, his tactical mind analyzing every detail of the situation. The emergency call had felt wrong, too convenient, too perfectly timed to interrupt his investigation. As they walked through the hospital corridors, Marcus noticed the subtle signs that confirmed his suspicions. Security guards positioned differently than before, staff members who avoided eye contact, and an unusual number of people in civilian clothes lingering in areas where they didn't belong. Dr. Mitchell was waiting in Tommy's room, but his demeanor had changed dramatically from the previous day. Gone was the confident, caring physician. In his place was a man under pressure, his movements sharp and agitated. When he saw Marcus enter with Tommy, something flickered across his face. Surprise, followed quickly by calculation. "Mr. Rodriguez," Dr. Mitchell said, his voice strained. "I was expecting you to come alone. Tommy should be resting." "My son seems perfectly fine," Marcus replied, his tone neutral, but his eyes never leaving the doctor's face. "What exactly is this emergency you called about?" Sarah stood beside Dr. Mitchell, and Marcus noted how they positioned themselves, close enough to communicate nonverbally, but far enough apart to maintain the illusion of a professional relationship. They'd rehearsed this, planned it together. "We noticed some irregularities in Tommy's latest brain scans," Dr. Mitchell said, consulting his clipboard. "Nothing immediately dangerous, but we need to run additional tests to rule out complications." Marcus's military training had taught him to recognize when someone was lying, and every fiber of his being screamed that Dr. Mitchell was fabricating this emergency. "I'd like to see these irregular scans." "That's not really necessary," Dr. Mitchell began. "I'm his father," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I want to see the medical evidence that's concerning you." Dr. Mitchell exchanged a glance with Sarah, and Marcus caught the silent communication between them. They were stalling, buying time for something. But for what? The answer became clear when Captain Hayes appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Rodriguez, we need to talk. Now." Marcus recognized the tone. It was the same one Hayes had used in Afghanistan when intelligence had gone bad, and they needed to abort a mission immediately. Something had gone wrong with their plan. "Tommy, stay right here with Mommy," Marcus instructed, then followed Hayes into the hallway. "They made you," Hayes said without preamble. "Dr. Mitchell knows you've been investigating. He called his lawyer an hour ago, then contacted hospital administration. They're claiming you're suffering from PTSD and making unfounded accusations." Marcus felt the walls closing in. "How do they know?" "Someone saw you in the security office yesterday. Word got back to Mitchell, and he's been planning his counterattack ever since. He's using his position here to discredit you before you can expose him." "What about the evidence we gathered?" Hayes's expression darkened. "That's the problem. Mitchell's claiming the security footage was tampered with, and without proper chain of custody, it might not be admissible. He's also suggesting that your deployment trauma is causing you to misinterpret innocent interactions." Marcus realized how brilliantly Dr. Mitchell had played this. By positioning himself as a concerned medical professional dealing with a potentially unstable veteran, He'd given himself cover while simultaneously discrediting Marcus's accusations. It was a perfect defensive strategy. There's more, Hayes continued. Mitchell's filed a complaint with hospital security claiming you've been harassing staff and making threats. They're preparing to have you escorted from the premises. As if summoned by Hayes's warning, 2 hospital security guards appeared at the end of the hallway, walking purposefully toward them. Marcus recognized the tactical situation immediately. He was being boxed in, cut off from his son, isolated so his enemies could control the narrative. I need 5 minutes alone with Tommy, Marcus said urgently. You've got it, Hayes replied, then positioned himself to intercept the security guards. Marcus returned to Tommy's room, where he found Sarah and Dr. Mitchell in hushed conversation. They broke apart when he entered, but not before he caught Sarah's words. He doesn't suspect anything about the real reason. The real reason. There was something else, something beyond the affair and the medical cover-up. Marcus's instincts, honed by years of combat experience, told him he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Tommy, Marcus said, kneeling beside his son's hospital bed, I need you to listen very carefully. Daddy has to go away for a little while, but I'm going to make sure you're safe. Are the bad guys coming? Tommy asked, his 8-year-old mind still processing everything in terms of the good versus evil stories Marcus used to tell him. Something like that, Marcus replied. If anyone asks you questions about Mommy or Dr. Jim, I want you to tell them exactly what you told me yesterday. The truth, okay? No matter what anyone says. Tommy nodded solemnly, and Marcus felt a surge of pride for his brave little boy who was caught in the middle of adult betrayals he couldn't understand. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward. Mr. Rodriguez, I think it's time for you to leave. Tommy needs rest, and your presence is clearly agitating him. My son looks perfectly calm to me, Marcus replied, standing to face the doctor directly. Nevertheless, as his attending physician, I'm asking you to go. If you refuse, I'll have to call security. The threat was clear, but Marcus had one more card to play. Before I go, Doctor, I'd like to ask you about your treatment protocols. Specifically, why there was a 90-minute delay between my son's arrival at this hospital and the beginning of his treatment. Dr. Mitchell's confident facade cracked slightly. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Marcus said, pulling out his phone and opening the security footage. I'm stating facts. Would you like to see the timestamp evidence? Sarah gasped, realizing that Marcus had somehow obtained proof of what had happened. Dr. Mitchell's face went pale, but he recovered quickly. Mr. Rodriguez, you're clearly suffering from paranoid delusions brought on by your military service, Dr. Mitchell said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone of a medical professional making a diagnosis. I'm recommending immediate psychiatric evaluation. It was a brilliant deflection. By questioning Marcus's mental state, Dr. Mitchell was attempting to invalidate any evidence he might present. But Marcus had anticipated this move. Then you won't mind if I share this security footage with the state medical board, Marcus replied calmly. I'm sure they'll be interested in your treatment decisions, regardless of my mental state. The room fell silent. Dr. Mitchell and Sarah exchanged a look of pure panic, and Marcus realized he'd finally gained the upper hand. But victory came with a price. The security guards had arrived, and Captain Hayes could only delay them for so long. Marcus, Sarah said suddenly, her voice taking on a desperate edge, please don't do this. Think about Tommy. Think about our family. I am thinking about Tommy, Marcus replied, his voice cold. I'm thinking about how his mother's affair put him in this hospital bed. I'm thinking about how her lover delayed his medical treatment to protect their secret. I'm thinking about justice. Dr. Mitchell stepped between Marcus and the door. You're not leaving here with that footage. The threat was unmistakable, and Marcus realized that Dr. Mitchell was prepared to escalate the situation beyond legal maneuvering. This had become personal, dangerous, and Tommy was caught in the middle. As the security guards entered the room, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He looked at his son, at his lying wife, at the doctor who had endangered his child's life, and he smiled with the cold confidence of a Navy SEAL who had just identified his primary targets. The war for his family was about to begin in earnest, and Marcus Rodriguez had never lost a war. The hospital security guards entered the room with the practiced efficiency of men accustomed to dealing with difficult situations, but Marcus could see in their eyes that they weren't entirely comfortable with what they'd been asked to do. He recognized the type: former military or police, men who understood duty but also recognized when something didn't feel right about their orders. "Mr. Rodriguez," the senior guard said, his voice respectful but firm, "we need you to come with us. Dr. Mitchell has expressed concerns about your behavior, and hospital administration wants to speak with you." Marcus looked at Tommy, whose young face showed confusion and fear. His son didn't understand why Daddy was in trouble, why the adults around him were acting strange, why his world had suddenly become filled with tension and whispered conversations. "5 more minutes with my son," Marcus requested calmly. "Then I'll come willingly." The guards exchanged glances. The senior guard nodded. 5 minutes. As soon as the guard stepped outside, Dr. Mitchell moved closer to Marcus, his medical mask of professionalism completely dropped. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said in a low, threatening voice. "This goes deeper than you think. Enlighten me," Marcus replied, his tone deadly calm. Sarah stepped between them, her hands shaking. "James, stop. Please. James." Not Dr. Mitchell. The familiarity in her voice revealed how deep their relationship had become, but there was something else: fear. Sarah was terrified of what Dr. Mitchell might say or do. "Tell him, Sarah," Dr. Mitchell continued, ignoring her plea. "Tell him about the insurance policy. Tell him about why it was so important that Tommy's accident looked authentic." Marcus felt the blood freeze in his veins. "What insurance policy?" Sarah's face went white. "James, no." "We agreed. Tell him about the life insurance policy you took out on Tommy 6 months ago," Dr. Mitchell pressed on, his voice filled with venom. "Tell him about how convenient it would have been if his head injury had been just a little more severe." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. An insurance policy on Tommy. The delayed medical treatment wasn't just about covering up an affair, it was about something far more sinister. They had been willing to let his son die for money. "You're insane," Sarah whispered, backing away from Dr. Mitchell. "That's not what we discussed. You said the policy was just in case something happened, in case we made something happen," Dr. Mitchell corrected coldly. "But you lost your nerve. You couldn't go through with it." Marcus's vision tunneled, his combat training warring with his parental rage. Every instinct screamed at him to eliminate the threat standing 3 feet away, but Tommy was watching, and Marcus couldn't let his son see his father become a killer. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone in the room. He laughed. "You really think I'm that easy to manipulate?" Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "Did you think I wouldn't record this conversation?" Dr. Mitchell's confident expression crumbled as he realized what Marcus had done. The phone had been recording since the moment Marcus entered the room. Every threat, every admission, every incriminating word was now preserved as evidence. "James, you idiot," Sarah hissed. "What have you done?" But Marcus wasn't finished. "Captain Hayes," he called out, knowing his former commanding officer was listening from the hallway. "I think you should hear this." Hayes entered the room, followed by someone Marcus hadn't expected, Detective Lisa Chun from the Virginia Beach Police Department. She was younger than Marcus had anticipated, with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd worked her way up through the ranks on merit rather than politics. "Detective Chun, Virginia Beach PD." She introduced herself, showing her badge. "Captain Hayes contacted us about potential criminal activity involving child endangerment and insurance fraud." Dr. Mitchell realized too late that he'd walked into a trap. Marcus had anticipated his psychological manipulation tactics and had prepared accordingly. The recording, the witness testimony, the security footage, it was all part of a coordinated operation designed to expose the truth. "This is entrapment," Dr. Mitchell said desperately. "That recording is inadmissible." "Actually," Detective Chin interrupted, "Virginia is a one-party consent state. Mr. Rodriguez was fully within his rights to record your conversation, especially given the threats you just made. Sarah collapsed into the chair beside Tommy's bed, the full weight of her situation finally hitting her. She wasn't just looking at divorce anymore. She was looking at criminal charges for conspiracy, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. "Mommy, why is everyone upset?" Tommy asked, his innocent voice cutting through the adult drama surrounding him. Marcus knelt beside his son's bed, taking Tommy's small hand in his. "Sometimes grown-ups make very bad decisions, buddy. But Daddy's going to make sure you're safe, okay?" Detective Chun was already taking notes, building her case. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm going to need you to provide all the evidence you've collected." Captain Hayes briefed me on the security footage and witness statements. "There's more," Marcus said, looking directly at Dr. Mitchell. "I accessed my home security system this morning. I have footage of Dr. Mitchell and my wife together, including the moments before and after Tommy's accident. I also have documentation showing the insurance policy was purchased using forged signatures, mine specifically." Dr. Mitchell's face went from pale to ashen. "You can't prove." "I can prove everything," Marcus interrupted, "including the fact that you delayed my son's medical treatment while you and my wife planned how to explain the situation. Every minute of delay is documented. Every decision you made is recorded." Sarah suddenly spoke up, her voice desperate. "I never agreed to hurt Tommy. James said the insurance was just a precaution, that we'd never actually use it. When Tommy got hurt, I was terrified. I never wanted him to die." "But you didn't stop Dr. Mitchell from delaying his treatment," Detective Chin pointed out. "You prioritized protecting your affair over your son's life." "I was scared," Sarah sobbed. "I didn't know what to do. James said if the affair came out, I'd lose everything in the divorce. He said he'd help me. But then Tommy came home early and saw us, and everything went wrong." Marcus listened to his wife's confession with a mixture of disgust and pity. The woman he'd married, the mother of his child, had been willing to gamble with their son's life to protect her secret and secure her financial future. Dr. Mitchell made one last desperate play. "You can't believe anything she says. Sarah's been unstable since her husband deployed. She developed an obsession with me, made up elaborate fantasies about our relationship. I was trying to let her down gently when the accident happened, but Sarah's reaction to his betrayal was immediate and devastating. 'You lying bastard,' she screamed. 'You planned everything. The insurance policy, the fake accident, all of it. You said we'd be together once Marcus was out of the picture.'" The room erupted in chaos as Sarah lunged at Dr. Mitchell, her carefully maintained facade finally cracking completely. The security guards rushed in to separate them while Detective Chun continued taking notes, building an airtight case against both conspirators. Through it all, Tommy watched with wide eyes, trying to understand why his mother was fighting with Dr. Jim, why his daddy looked so angry, why strangers were asking questions and writing things down. Marcus realized that his son was witnessing the complete destruction of their family, but also its salvation. The truth was finally coming out, painful as it was. Tommy would be safe now, protected from people who had been willing to sacrifice his life for their own selfish desires. As Detective Chun placed handcuffs on Dr. Mitchell and read him his rights, Marcus felt a cold satisfaction. The mission was nearly complete, but he sensed there was still one more revelation to come, something that would change everything he thought he knew about the depth of their betrayal. As Detective Chun processed the arrests, Marcus found himself alone with Tommy for the first time since the truth had exploded into the open. The hospital room felt different now, no longer a place of healing, but a battlefield where his family had been torn apart and rebuilt in the span of minutes. "Daddy," Tommy said quietly, his young voice cutting through Marcus's thoughts. "Is Mommy going to jail?" The question hit Marcus harder than any enemy fire he'd faced overseas. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his mother had been willing to let him die? How do you preserve some semblance of innocence while ensuring he understands the gravity of what happened? "Mommy made some very bad choices," Marcus said carefully, sitting on the edge of Tommy's bed. "She's going to have to face the consequences of those choices. But you're safe now, and that's all that matters to me." Tommy nodded with the solemn understanding that children possess when their world shifts fundamentally. Will I still get to see her? I don't know yet, buddy. There are going to be a lot of changes. Captain Hayes appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Rodriguez, we need to talk. There's been a development. Marcus looked at Tommy, who was already reaching for one of his books. I'll be right outside, son. If you need anything, just call for me. In the hallway, Hayes pulled Marcus aside, his voice low and urgent. Detective Chin found something else during her preliminary investigation. Dr. Mitchell's been under investigation by the State Medical Board for the past 6 months. For what? Suspicious patient deaths. 3 cases where he was the attending physician, all involving delayed treatment, all resulting in fatalities. The families filed complaints, but Mitchell's reputation protected him. Until now. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying Tommy wasn't the first? We don't know for sure, but Detective Chin thinks Mitchell's been using his position to manipulate medical situations for personal gain. Insurance fraud might be just the tip of the iceberg. The implications were staggering. Marcus realized that his son hadn't just been the victim of an isolated crime. He'd been targeted by a serial killer who used his medical credentials as a weapon. There's more, Hayes continued. Sarah's phone records show extensive communication with Mitchell going back 8 months, not the few months she claimed. They've been planning this longer than anyone realized. Marcus leaned against the wall, processing the magnitude of what he'd discovered. His wife hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been an active participant in a murder conspiracy that stretched back to before his deployment. How many others? Marcus asked. That's what Detective Chun is trying to figure out. But Marcus, there's something else you need to know. One of the previous victims was a 7-year-old boy whose mother was also having an affair with Mitchell. The pattern was becoming clear, and it was more horrifying than Marcus had imagined. Dr. Mitchell had been systematically targeting mothers with young children, seducing them, and then manipulating medical emergencies for financial gain. Detective Chun appeared at the end of the hallway, walking briskly toward them with a folder in her hands. Her expression was the kind Marcus recognized from military briefings when the intelligence was worse than expected. Mr. Rodriguez, I need to show you something, she said, opening the folder. We've been analyzing Dr. Mitchell's patient files, and we found a disturbing pattern. The files showed a clear progression. Mothers with insurance policies on their children, all of whom had been romantically involved with Dr. Mitchell, all of whom had experienced accidental injuries to their children that resulted in Mitchell being the treating physician. The difference with your case, Detective Chin continued, is that you came home before the plan could be fully executed. Your unexpected return disrupted their timeline. Marcus stared at the photographs of the other victims, children Tommy's age who hadn't been as fortunate. How many? 5 confirmed cases over the past 2 years. Mitchell would identify vulnerable mothers, usually military wives or single mothers with substantial insurance policies. He'd begin romantic relationships, gradually convince them to increase their children's life insurance coverage, then create opportunities for accidents. The clinical precision of the operation made Marcus's stomach turn. This wasn't passion gone wrong. This was calculated, systematic murder. Where's my wife now? Marcus asked. Being processed at the station. She's asking to speak with you. Marcus looked back toward Tommy's room, torn between his duty as a father and his need for answers. I want to hear what she has to say. An hour later, Marcus sat across from Sarah in an interrogation room at the Virginia Beach Police Department. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the weight of her crimes. But when she looked at him, Marcus saw something he hadn't expected. Genuine remorse mixed with desperate self-preservation. Marcus, please, she began, her voice hoarse from crying. You have to believe me. I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? Marcus asked coldly. Just the affair? Just the insurance fraud? Or just the part where you let our son suffer to protect your secret? Sarah flinched as if he'd struck her. James said no one would get hurt. He said it would just be paperwork, that we'd never actually use the policies. But then he started talking about how much money we'd have if something happened to Tommy, and I got scared. So scared that you took out a $2 million life insurance policy on our 8-year-old son. James forged your signature. I didn't even know about it until after it was done. Marcus leaned forward, using the interrogation techniques he'd learned in military intelligence. Sarah, Detective Chun has your phone records. You were actively communicating with Mitchell about the insurance policy. You researched the payout terms. You discussed timing and methods. Sarah's composure cracked completely. You don't understand what it's like being married to someone who's never home. I was lonely, scared, trying to raise Tommy by myself while you were off playing soldier. Playing soldier? Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. I didn't mean it like that, Sarah backtracked quickly. But James made me feel important, valued. He said he loved me, that we could have a life together if we just got through this one difficult situation. The difficult situation being the murder of our son. It wasn't supposed to be murder. Sarah screamed. James said Tommy would be fine, that he'd make sure he recovered completely. The insurance money was just supposed to be a bonus, something to help us start over. Marcus stared at his wife, the woman he'd promised to love and protect, the mother of his child, and realized he was looking at a stranger. The Sarah he'd married would never have endangered Tommy for any reason. This version of her had been corrupted by greed and manipulation until she was capable of the unthinkable. Did you know about the other children? Marcus asked. Sarah's face went white. What other children? The 5 kids who died while Dr. Mitchell was treating them. The 5 mothers who are now widows because your boyfriend is a serial killer. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. James saves lives. He's a doctor. Marcus slid the case files across the table. Look at them, Sarah. Look at the children who died because James Mitchell decided their lives were worth less than insurance money. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the first file, seeing the photograph of 7-year-old Michael Chun, no relation to the detective, who had died from complications following a routine procedure that Mitchell had deliberately botched. Oh God, Sarah sobbed, covering her mouth. Oh God, what have I done? Marcus watched his wife realize the full extent of what she'd become involved in, and for a moment, he almost felt pity for her. Almost. You have one chance to do the right thing, Marcus said quietly. Tell Detective Chin everything. Every conversation, every plan, every detail about Mitchell's operation. Help her stop him from hurting any more children. Sarah looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. Will you ever forgive me? Marcus stood up, straightening his uniform jacket. I'll make sure Tommy knows that his mother loved him, even if she lost her way. But forgiveness? That's not mine to give. That belongs to the families of the children who didn't survive your boyfriend's medical care. As Marcus walked out of the interrogation room, he knew that the hardest part of his mission was complete. The truth was exposed, the criminals were caught, and Tommy was safe. But he also knew that the real battle was just beginning. The battle to rebuild his son's life from the ashes of the family that had betrayed him. 6 months later, Marcus sat in the witness box of the Virginia Beach Circuit Court, his dress blue uniform pressed to perfection, his testimony about to seal the fate of the 2 people who had betrayed his family in the most unthinkable way. The courtroom was packed with media, families of other victims, and law enforcement officials who had worked tirelessly to build an airtight case against Dr. James Mitchell and Sarah Rodriguez. Tommy sat in the front row beside Captain Hayes, his small frame dwarfed by the formal surroundings, but his eyes alert and focused on his father. The past 6 months had been difficult for the 8-year-old, filled with therapy sessions, police interviews, and the gradual understanding that his mother would never be coming home. But he was healing, both physically and emotionally, under Marcus's devoted care. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh stood at the prosecutor's table, her reputation for handling complex criminal cases having made her the perfect choice to lead the prosecution. She had spent months unraveling the full extent of Mitchell's crimes, building a case that would ensure both defendants received maximum sentences. Mr. Rodriguez, D.A. Walsh began. Please tell the court about the events of August 15th, when you discovered your son in the hospital. Marcus's voice was steady and controlled as he recounted the timeline. His return from deployment, finding the empty house, receiving Sarah's panic call, and the growing realization that something was fundamentally wrong with the story he was being told. At what point did you begin to suspect that your wife and Dr. Mitchell were involved in a conspiracy? D.A. Walsh asked. When I observed their body language in the hospital, Marcus replied. Their familiarity was inappropriate for a professional relationship. As someone trained in reading people and situations, I recognized the signs of deception. Defense attorney Michael Harrison, representing Dr. Mitchell, stood for cross-examination. He was a seasoned criminal defense lawyer known for his aggressive tactics, but Marcus had prepared for this moment. Mr. Rodriguez, isn't it true that your military service left you with trust issues and a tendency toward paranoid thinking? Harrison asked. My military service taught me to distinguish between paranoia and legitimate threat assessment, Marcus replied calmly. The evidence speaks for itself. But you admit you were suffering from adjustment difficulties following your deployment? Marcus looked directly at the jury. I was suffering from discovering that my wife was having an affair with a man who endangered my son's life. Any father would be disturbed by that revelation. The defense attorney tried several more angles, attempting to portray Marcus as an unstable veteran whose accusations couldn't be trusted. But each attack was met with calm, factual responses that demonstrated Marcus's mental clarity and reliability as a witness. When Sarah's defense attorney, Linda Chun, Detective Chen's sister, ironically, stood for her cross-examination, the approach was different. She attempted to portray Sarah as a victim of Dr. Mitchell's manipulation, a lonely military wife who had been seduced and coerced into participating in crimes she didn't understand. Mrs. Rodriguez has expressed deep remorse for her actions, Attorney Chen argued. She was psychologically manipulated by a predator who took advantage of her isolation and vulnerability. Remorse doesn't resurrect the children who died because of decisions she helped make, Marcus replied, his voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. My son survived because I came home early. 5 other children weren't that fortunate. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Phone records showing detailed planning between Sarah and Mitchell. Security footage from the hospital and Marcus's home. Expert testimony about the deliberately delayed medical treatment. Financial records revealing the insurance policies and Mitchell's pattern of targeting vulnerable families. But the most damning evidence came from Mitchell himself. During a recorded conversation with an undercover officer posing as a potential accomplice, Mitchell had bragged about his method. You find the right woman, someone desperate, someone with resources, and you make her need you. Then you show her how much her problems are worth in insurance money. The medical side is easy when you control the treatment. When Detective Chun took the stand, her testimony revealed the full scope of the investigation. We identified 17 potential victims over a 3-year period, she testified. Dr. Mitchell used dating apps and social media to target single mothers and military wives. He would research their financial situations, their children's insurance coverage, and their emotional vulnerabilities before making contact. The families of the deceased children were given the opportunity to provide victim impact statements. Marcus watched the jury's faces as parents described losing their children to what they had believed were tragic medical complications, only to discover their deaths had been orchestrated by a trusted physician. Mrs. Rebecca Martinez, whose 6-year-old daughter had died during what should have been routine surgery, spoke directly to Mitchell. You took my baby's life for money. You comforted me while I grieved, knowing you were the one who killed her. There is no punishment severe enough for what you've done. The trial lasted 3 weeks. During that time, Marcus maintained a careful routine, attending court during the day, spending evenings with Tommy, working with therapists to help his son process the trauma of discovering his mother's crimes. The boy was resilient, but Marcus knew the scars would last a lifetime. On the final day of testimony, Marcus was recalled to the stand for a brief statement. D.A. Walsh asked him one final question. Mr. Rodriguez, what do you want the jury to understand about this case? Marcus looked at Mitchell, then at Sarah, before addressing the jury directly. This case isn't about a marriage that failed or an affair gone wrong. This is about a systematic predator who used his medical training to murder children for profit, and about the people who enabled him. My son survived because luck and timing saved him. 5 other families weren't that fortunate. He paused, his voice growing stronger. Justice for those children and their families requires accountability for everyone who participated in these crimes, regardless of their motivations or regrets. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the verdicts were unanimous. Dr. James Mitchell was found guilty on all counts. 5 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, medical malpractice, and child endangerment. Sarah Rodriguez was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sarah received 25 years, with the possibility of parole after 15 years, a sentence that reflected both her cooperation with authorities and her genuine remorse, but also the severity of her crimes. As the verdicts were read, Marcus felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. Justice had been served, but it wouldn't bring back the children who had died, wouldn't erase Tommy's trauma, wouldn't repair the trust that had been shattered. But it would ensure that no other family would suffer at the hands of Dr. James Mitchell, and it would send a clear message that those who prey on vulnerable families and innocent children would face the full consequences of their actions. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was surrounded by reporters asking for his reaction to the verdicts. He gave a brief statement. Today's verdicts represent justice for the children who lost their lives and accountability for those responsible. My focus now is on my son's future and ensuring that no other families experience what we've been through. As he walked away with Tommy's small hand in his, Marcus realized that the mission was finally complete. The enemy had been defeated, the innocent had been protected, and justice had prevailed. But the war had changed him, just as his military service had changed him. He was no longer the trusting husband and father who had left for Afghanistan 18 months ago. He was someone harder, more vigilant, someone who understood that the greatest threats don't always come from foreign enemies in distant lands. Sometimes they come from the people sleeping beside you, wearing white coats and carrying wedding rings. 2 years after the trial, Marcus Rodriguez had built a new life for himself and Tommy. They lived in a different house now, a modest ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood where Tommy could ride his bike safely and where the memories of betrayal couldn't follow them. Marcus had left active duty and worked as a security consultant, using his military expertise to help protect other families from the kinds of threats they had faced. Tommy, now 10 years old, was thriving. The therapy had helped him process the trauma, and while he still had difficult days, he'd grown into a resilient, thoughtful boy who understood more about loyalty and trust than most adults. He rarely spoke about his mother, though Marcus made sure he knew that Sarah had loved him, even if she'd made terrible choices. On this particular autumn evening, Marcus was helping Tommy with his homework when the doorbell rang. Through the window, he saw Detective Chun standing on his porch, her expression serious. It had been months since they'd last spoken, and her unexpected visit immediately put Marcus on alert. "Detective Chun," Marcus said, opening the door. "Is everything all right?" "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, glancing toward Tommy. "Is there somewhere private we can speak?" Marcus led her to his home office, closing the door behind them. Detective Chun looked older than her years, worn down by the weight of the cases she'd worked since the Mitchell investigation. "I have news about Sarah," she began without preamble. "She's dead." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, not because he still loved his ex-wife, but because of what this would mean for Tommy. What happened? She was found in her cell 3 days ago. Initial investigations suggested suicide. She'd been struggling with depression and guilt over the crimes. But the coroner's report revealed something unexpected. Detective Chun pulled out a file, her hands steady despite the gravity of what she was about to reveal. Sarah was poisoned. Someone slipped ricin into her food over a period of several days. It's a sophisticated method that requires knowledge of chemistry and access to restricted materials. Marcus felt his tactical instincts engage. Inside job. That's what we thought initially. But then we found this in her cell. Detective Chun handed him a plastic evidence bag containing a letter. She'd been writing it over several weeks, apparently as a form of therapy. Read the last entry. Marcus scanned the pages until he reached the final entry, dated just 2 days before Sarah's death. I know someone is trying to kill me. I've been sick for weeks, and the prison doctor says it's stress, but I know better. James found a way to reach me even from death row. He always said he had connections, people who owed him favors. I think one of the guards, or maybe someone in the kitchen, is working for him. I deserve to die for what I did to those children, but not like this. Not giving him the satisfaction of silencing me forever. If something happens to me, Marcus needs to know that James Mitchell is still dangerous, even locked away. He's been planning something, waiting for the right moment. The other inmates say he gets visits from people who aren't on any official list. He's building something, some kind of network. Marcus, if you're reading this, protect Tommy. James always said Tommy was special, that he reminded him of his own son. I never understood what he meant until now. There's something about Tommy that James wants, something beyond money or revenge. I wish I could tell you what it is, but they're coming for me now. The guard is at my door. Tell Tommy I'm sorry. Tell him I loved him despite everything. And Marcus, don't trust anyone, not even the people helping you. Some of them belong to James. Marcus read the letter twice, his blood growing colder with each word. When did Mitchell die? That's the problem, Detective Chun said grimly. He didn't. 3 weeks ago, there was an incident during a prison transfer. The transport vehicle was attacked by what appeared to be a random group of criminals. 2 guards were killed, and Mitchell escaped. We've been hunting him ever since, but he seems to have disappeared completely. The implications crashed over Marcus like a tidal wave. Dr. James Mitchell, the man who had tried to murder his son, who had orchestrated the deaths of 5 other children, was free. And according to Sarah's letter, he had been planning something that involved Tommy specifically. Why wasn't I notified immediately? Marcus demanded. Because we didn't want to cause panic until we had more information. But Sarah's murder changes everything. It proves Mitchell has resources and connections we didn't know about. He's been building a network while in prison, and now he's using it to eliminate witnesses and settle scores. Marcus's mind raced through the tactical implications. Mitchell was intelligent, resourceful, and completely without conscience. He had medical knowledge that made him dangerous, connections that had facilitated his escape, and apparently some specific interest in Tommy that went beyond simple revenge. What did Sarah mean about Tommy reminding Mitchell of his own son? Marcus asked. Detective Chun consulted her notes. We researched Mitchell's background more thoroughly after finding the letter. Turns out he had a son who died in a drowning accident 15 years ago. The boy was 8 years old when he died. The same age Tommy was when Mitchell first encountered him. You think Mitchell sees Tommy as some kind of replacement for his dead son? It's possible. We also discovered that Mitchell has been corresponding with several other inmates who were convicted of crimes against children. The letters suggest he's been developing some kind of ideology about rescuing children from unfit parents. The full horror of the situation became clear to Marcus. Mitchell wasn't just seeking revenge. He was planning to kidnap Tommy, possibly believing he was saving the boy from an unfit father. In Mitchell's twisted mind, he might see himself as Tommy's true protector, the man who had tried to save him from an abusive military father and unfaithful mother. What's the current threat assessment? Marcus asked, switching into operational mode. Extremely high. We have evidence that Mitchell has been surveilling your neighborhood. Security cameras caught images of him near Tommy's school last week. He's been studying your routines, your security measures, your vulnerabilities. Marcus felt the familiar calm that came over him in combat situations. The enemy had revealed himself, the mission parameters were clear, and civilian protection was the primary objective. I need to move Tommy immediately, Marcus said. We've arranged a safe house, Detective Chin replied. Federal marshals will provide protection while we hunt Mitchell down. But Marcus shook his head. No. Mitchell has demonstrated that he has people inside the system. I can't trust official protection. What are you planning? Marcus looked toward his closed office door, behind which his son was innocently working on math problems, unaware that a predator was stalking him. I'm going to do what I should have done 2 years ago. I'm going to hunt James Mitchell down and end this permanently. Detective Chen stood up, recognizing the look in Marcus's eyes. Marcus, you can't take the law into your own hands. We'll catch him through proper channels. Your proper channels let him escape from prison and murder my ex-wife. Marcus replied coldly. Mitchell made this personal when he targeted my family. Now he's going to learn what happens when you threaten a Navy SEAL's child. As Detective Chen left, promising to keep Marcus informed of any developments, Marcus began planning his final mission. This time, there would be no trial, no lawyers, no possibility of escape or appeal. Dr. James Mitchell had declared war on the Rodriguez family. Marcus was going to finish it. But first, he had to tell Tommy that the nightmare they thought was over was actually just beginning. And somewhere in the darkness beyond their quiet neighborhood, James Mitchell was watching, waiting, and planning to claim the son he believed should have been his all along. Share this video with anyone who loves psychological thrillers and revenge stories that keep you guessing until the very last moment. What story should we tell next? Let us know in the comments. More military thriller revenge stories? Corporate conspiracy and betrayal? Family secrets that destroy lives? Your engagement drives our storytelling. Every like, comment, and share helps us bring you more gripping tales of justice, betrayal, and the lengths people will go to protect the ones they love.